You're not welcome here anymore, Sarah. It's time to pack up and leave. You're nothing but a burden now. The words hit me like a cold wave, freezing me in place. My daughter-in-law, Jessica, said this in front of everyone. Her voice sharp, no hint of affection, no trace of the kindness I thought was still there. I just stood there, frozen, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't the first time she'd treated me with disregard, but it was the first time she'd been so blunt about it. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. I just stared at her, at the woman who had once smiled at me so warmly and pretended to care, now the face of contempt. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about her controlling every part of our family. I felt my chest tighten. The betrayal was so strong, I could almost taste it. But Jessica, it's Mother's Day, I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. I didn't ask for any of this. You were never part of the plan. She wasn't even looking at me now. Her gaze was fixed on her phone, scrolling through something, probably ignoring the truth in front of her. Her words didn't hit me with the force of anger, they were casual, as though she was dismissing an old piece of furniture. This is my house now. You're just in the way. You'll have to figure something out, she said, without even sparing me a glance. Her callousness stung like 1,000 needles piercing through the silence that had taken over the room. For a moment, I thought I might break down, but something inside me shifted. I had to keep my composure. I had to keep my dignity. I had spent years sacrificing for this family, for the people I loved, but now I saw clearly, they had all been using me, and Jessica was leading the charge. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced myself to look away from her, even as every muscle in my body screamed to respond. But what was the point? What could I say that would make any difference? I had given everything for this family. I had raised her, loved her as my own, and now she was telling me to leave, as though I was just a stranger who had overstayed her welcome. The years of kindness and patience seemed to mean nothing now. I couldn't shake the image of her cold smile, her words echoing in my mind. You're just in the way. It was the harsh truth I had been avoiding for years. She had always wanted to control every aspect of my life, and now she was doing just that. I turned away from her, not willing to let her see the hurt in my eyes. I could feel my heart breaking, but I refused to let her see that. The years of pretending, of being the good mother-in-law, the good wife, had come to this. I had been living in a house that no longer felt like home, surrounded by people who had no respect for me. I had given everything, and now, I was left with nothing. No, that wasn't entirely true. I still had my dignity. I still had my strength. And I was done letting them walk all over me. I had sacrificed for so long, but it was time to take control of my life. It wasn't going to be easy. I was older now, and the world didn't seem so kind to women like me. But I had lived through worse. I had lived through the loss of my husband, the years of struggling, and I had survived it all. And I would survive this too. Jessica's words echoed in my ears, but I could feel the walls closing in, a new determination forming in the pit of my stomach. I wasn't going to beg for her approval anymore. I wasn't going to let her decide my worth. I turned and walked out of the room, my footsteps heavy but resolute. I wasn't going to let her win. I was going to find my way out of this, one step at a time. I wasn't going to let this house, these people, keep me trapped in a cage of their making. I was more than this. And I would show them all. The next morning, I woke up early, the silence of the house weighing heavily on me. The sun was barely rising, casting a soft glow through the curtains. I hadn't slept much. The words from yesterday still echoed in my mind, their harshness ringing through my thoughts. I had spent the entire night replaying the scene over and over, trying to make sense of it, but I couldn't. How had everything gone so wrong? I had always been there for my family, always made sure everything ran smoothly, and now, I was being thrown aside like I was nothing. I sat up slowly in bed, staring at the empty space beside me. Noel's side of the bed was untouched, just as it had been for the past year since his passing. I could still feel the ghost of his presence here, in this room, in this house that had once been full of love and laughter. Now, it felt cold and hollow, as if the walls themselves had turned against me. I pulled myself out of bed and made my way downstairs. The house felt emptier than ever, as if the absence of one person had sucked the life out of everything. I tried to focus on the small tasks ahead of me, preparing breakfast, cleaning up, but it felt like I was going through the motions. I was so lost in my thoughts that I didn't even hear the doorbell ring. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Jessica standing there, her face expressionless. "We need to talk," she said, her voice cold. I stepped back, letting her into the house, but I had no idea what she wanted. After everything that had happened yesterday, I couldn't imagine there was anything left to say. She followed me into the living room, sitting down on the couch without waiting for an invitation. I stood there, watching her, trying to keep my emotions in check. I couldn't let her see how hurt I was. "What is it, Jessica?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the floor, her fingers playing with the hem of her sleeve. I could feel the tension in the room, thick and suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her words careful and measured. "I didn't mean what I said yesterday," she said, her tone betraying no real emotion. "But it's time for you to leave. You're not getting any younger, and this house is too much for you. We've been talking about it, and it's time." I stood there, stunned. Was she serious? After everything, this was how she wanted to end it? I had been married to Noel for over 30 years, and now, in his absence, my own family was turning their backs on me. I had spent my entire life taking care of everyone, making sure they were happy, and now I was being told to leave. I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked as I spoke. This house, this was mine and Noel's. It's not just a place. It's our life. How could you just take that away from me? Jessica didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she looked past me, her gaze fixed on the window. "You don't need this place," she said flatly. "You can move somewhere smaller, easier to manage. Maybe a senior living community. You're not getting any younger, and it's not safe for you to be alone in this big house." The words stung more than I cared to admit. I had spent the better part of my life building a home, a family, and now I was being told that I wasn't needed. That I was a burden. "You're just trying to get rid of me," I said, the words slipping out before I could stop them. Jessica's eyes finally met mine, but there was no apology there, no remorse. Just cold indifference. "It's for the best," she said, her voice soft but firm. "You'll be better off, and so will we." I stood there, feeling a mixture of anger and sorrow swirling inside me. This was it. This was the moment where everything had changed. I had been so sure that, despite everything, my family would be there for me. But now, I realized, I had been wrong. The love I had given, the sacrifices I had made, meant nothing to them. I wasn't a mother anymore, I wasn't a wife. I was just someone to be cast aside. "I'm not going anywhere," I said, my voice steady now, despite the turmoil inside. "This is my home, and I'm staying." Jessica didn't say anything. She just stood up and walked toward the door, leaving me standing there, staring after her. I didn't chase her. I didn't beg her to stay. I had nothing left to say to her. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. A beginning of something I couldn't yet see clearly, but I knew I had to face. The world around me was changing, and I had no choice but to change with it. I took a deep breath, the air thick with emotion, and walked back into the living room. The emptiness of the house was overwhelming, but it wasn't just the house that was empty now. It was my heart. I sat down on the couch, feeling the weight of everything settle on me. This wasn't how I had envisioned my life at this age. I thought I'd be surrounded by family, by love. But instead, I was alone, betrayed, and fighting to keep what was mine. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I couldn't just give up. Not now. Not ever. The days passed in a blur. Each morning, I would wake up, sit in the same chair by the window, and stare at the life I used to know. The house felt smaller now, even though the walls hadn't changed. The silence in the halls echoed louder than ever. I tried to go through the motions, making coffee, dusting the shelves, walking through the garden, but it felt empty. My hands, once steady with purpose, now trembled slightly as I moved from one task to another. The only thing that seemed to fill the air was the weight of Jessica's words from that day. "You're just in the way." I couldn't shake them. Every corner of this house, every piece of furniture, every photo hanging on the wall reminded me of the family I had built, and now, it all felt like it was slipping away. One evening, as I sat in the living room, I heard the familiar sound of the doorbell. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated for a moment before going to answer. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see my son, Wade, standing there. His face looked strained, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a look of discomfort. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. I stepped aside to let him in, not sure what to expect. He sat down on the couch, not immediately making eye contact with me. I waited for him to speak, my heart pounding in my chest. "It's about Jessica," he started, his words slow and careful, as though he was choosing them with great effort. "I know things have been difficult between you two, but she's been under a lot of pressure lately." I stared at him, confused. "Under pressure?" "Wade, she's been nothing but cruel to me. She told me I was a burden, that I didn't belong here." "How is that pressure?" Wade shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I know, Mom, but she's trying to handle everything. The house, the bills, everything. I just think you should consider what she's going through too." His words stung, more than I cared to admit. I had spent my life supporting him, raising him to be a man who would stand by his family. But now, he was defending the woman who had just thrown me out of my own home. "And what about me, Wade?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to keep it steady. "What about all the years I spent taking care of this family? You think it doesn't matter?" Wade looked down, his eyes flickering with guilt. "I don't know what to say, Mom. It's just complicated." "Complicated?" I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. "It's not complicated. She wants me gone, and you're helping her do it." I stood up abruptly, the anger rising in me like a storm. "I've given everything for this family. Everything. And now, after your father's gone, I'm being told I'm a burden?" Wade didn't respond. His silence spoke volumes. I felt something in my chest tighten, but I refused to let the tears fall. I wouldn't let him see me break down. "You know, I never expected this from you," I said, my voice cold. "You were my son. You were supposed to understand. But I guess I was wrong." Wade stood up quickly, his hand reaching out as though to comfort me, but I stepped back. I didn't want his pity. I didn't need it. "I don't want your pity, Wade. I want respect. I want you to stand up for what's right, not just go along with whatever Jessica wants." He pulled his hand back slowly, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I'll talk to her," he said, his voice quieter now. "But you need to understand, this isn't just about you. It's about all of us, and we're all trying to find our way in a new world without Dad." "Without your father?" I repeated, the words hanging in the air between us. "Wade, your father is gone, but that doesn't mean you forget everything we built together. This house, this family, it all meant something." He sighed, looking away from me. "I know it does, Mom. But sometimes, things change." "Not everything changes," I said firmly, my gaze locking onto his. "I don't care what Jessica thinks, or what you think. I'm not going anywhere. This is my home. And if I have to fight for it, I will." I walked past him, heading back to the kitchen, my mind racing. Wade didn't stop me. He didn't even try to argue anymore. I knew he was torn, caught between the woman he had married and the mother who had always been there for him. But this time, he wasn't going to get away with pretending like he didn't know what was happening. This wasn't just about Jessica. This was about the family I had spent my life building, and I wasn't going to let it be torn apart without a fight. I didn't know what the next step was, but I was done being the one who had to swallow the pain. It was time for me to take back what was mine. I had raised him to be strong, but now, I had to show him what real strength looked like. The next few days passed in a haze. I moved through the house like a ghost, doing the chores I had always done, but now everything felt different. The house was too quiet. It no longer felt like home. Each room seemed to carry a weight, the weight of betrayal, the weight of all the years I had spent giving and receiving so little in return. It wasn't the kind of silence that brought peace. It was a heavy, oppressive silence. I had tried to reach out to Wade a few times after our conversation, but he always seemed to be too busy, too distracted. He was avoiding me, just like Jessica. The distance between us grew wider each day. I knew something had to change, but I didn't know what. I wasn't sure where I was going or how I was going to fix this, but one thing was certain, I wasn't going to let them push me out. I couldn't. My pride wouldn't allow it. One afternoon, as I was sitting on the porch, watching the sun begin to set, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I stood up slowly, my curiosity piqued. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see a familiar face, my old friend, Carol. She was standing there, smiling warmly at me, her eyes filled with sympathy. "Sarah, I hope I'm not interrupting anything," she said, her voice soft. "I just wanted to check in on you." I stepped aside to let her in, feeling a little embarrassed. It had been years since Carol had visited. We used to spend so much time together when our children were young, but after life took us in different directions, we had lost touch. But now, she was standing in front of me, offering the kind of support I hadn't gotten from my own family. "You're not interrupting," I said quietly, motioning for her to sit down. "I've just been adjusting." Carol sat down across from me, her eyes scanning the room, noticing the subtle changes. "I heard about what happened with Jessica," she said, her voice gentle. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." I let out a small sigh, the weight of everything finally catching up to me. "I don't know, Carol," I said, shaking my head. "I thought I was strong, but it's harder than I thought." Carol placed a hand on mine, her touch warm and comforting. "I know it's not easy, but you're tougher than you think. You've been through so much, Sarah. You don't have to go through this alone." Her words, simple as they were, brought a small amount of relief. I had spent so much time focusing on my family, on making sure everyone else was okay, that I had neglected myself. It was time to change that. I had to start taking care of myself, or I would lose everything. I had to stop letting them dictate my worth. I looked at Carol, grateful for her presence, but also determined to take control of my own future. "I can't let them push me out," I said, my voice firm. "This is my home, and I'm not leaving." Carol smiled, nodding in agreement. "That's the spirit, Sarah. You deserve better than this. You've spent your whole life taking care of everyone else. Now it's time for you to take care of yourself." I felt a small spark of hope ignite inside me. Maybe I wasn't as lost as I had thought. Maybe there was still a chance to rebuild, to take back the control I had lost. "I don't know what the next step is, Carol," I admitted. "But I'm not just going to sit here and let them walk all over me. I'm done being the one who always sacrifices." Carol gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "You've got this, Sarah. You've always had it in you." I smiled at her, grateful for the support, but more than that, I felt something shifting inside me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity. I knew what I had to do. It was time to take charge of my life, to stop letting fear or guilt control me. I wasn't just a mother, a wife, or a grandmother. I was Sarah, and I was stronger than I had given myself credit for. I stood up from the chair, my resolve solidifying with every passing second. "Thank you, Carol," I said, my voice steady. You've given me the strength to keep going. I'm going to fight for what's mine. Carol stood up as well, pulling me into a hug. You don't need to fight alone, Sarah, she said. I'll be here, every step of the way. That hug, that simple act of kindness, reminded me of something I had almost forgotten. There were still people in my life who cared, people who saw me for who I was, not just what I could give. I wasn't alone in this, not anymore. As Carol left, I watched her drive away, the weight in my chest feeling a little lighter. I knew this wouldn't be easy. I knew the road ahead would be full of challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a fighting chance. I walked back inside, my head held a little higher, my steps a little steadier. I wasn't going to let Jessica or anyone else decide my worth. I had lived through so much, and now, it was time to live for me. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The next day, after Carol left, I sat in the living room, trying to gather my thoughts. The house was still quiet, but something inside me had shifted. I wasn't going to let them treat me like I was invisible anymore. I had been invisible for too long. I thought back to the years I spent supporting my family, always putting them first, always making sure their needs were met before my own. I had never asked for anything in return. But now, it felt like I had been taken for granted. Jessica's words echoed in my mind, cold and cutting. You're just in the way. How could she say that? How could she be so cruel? I had given her everything, my love, my time, my support. And now, she was telling me I was a burden? No. I wasn't going to let her win. I wasn't going to let her take everything from me. I had worked too hard for this house, for this family. I had raised my son, Wade, to be a man of integrity, or so I thought. Now, it felt like everything I had done had been for nothing. I needed to figure out how to make things right. I needed to find a way to take back control of my life. But first, I had to confront the truth. Wade had been avoiding me ever since that day we talked. He hadn't returned my calls, and every time I saw him, he seemed distant. It hurt more than I cared to admit. He was my son, my flesh and blood, and yet he was acting like a stranger. I thought about calling him again, but I knew it wouldn't do any good. He had made his choice. So, I decided to do something different. I would stop waiting for him to come to me. I would go to him. The next afternoon, I drove to Wade's house. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, but I knew I had to say something. When I arrived, I stood at the door for a moment, my heart racing. I had no idea how this conversation would go, but I knew it couldn't go on like this. Wade answered the door, his expression softening when he saw me standing there. Mom, he said quietly, stepping aside to let me in. I walked into the house, trying to keep my composure, but the tension in the air was thick. We sat down in the living room, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I could feel the weight of everything that had happened between us. Finally, I spoke. Wade, what's going on? Why are you avoiding me? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not that I'm avoiding you, Mom. It's just, everything's been so complicated. With Jessica, with the house, with everything. Complicated? I repeated, my voice sharp. You don't get to use that word. This isn't complicated, Wade. This is about you choosing her over me. This is about you turning your back on your own mother. Wade looked away, his face pained. I don't know what to say, Mom. I'm just trying to keep the peace. Jessica and we've been through a lot. And with everything going on, it just feels like I have to make a choice. A choice? I said, my voice rising. There's no choice to make, Wade. You don't choose one person over the other. Not like this. Not when it's your family. He stood up, pacing across the room, his hands clenched into fists. I don't want to hurt you, Mom. But I don't know how to make everyone happy. She's been under a lot of stress, and she feels like she's losing control. I can't just walk away from that. I can't just turn my back on her. What about me, Wade? I asked, my voice cracking. What about everything I've done for you? Everything I've sacrificed? Does that not matter to you? He stopped pacing, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. Of course it matters, Mom. But it's just not that simple. Jessica's been my wife for years, and I have to think about her, too. I can't just ignore her feelings. And what about mine? I said, my voice rising in frustration. What about the years I spent taking care of you, supporting you, loving you? Don't I deserve something in return? Don't I deserve your loyalty? Wade looked like he was about to say something, but he stopped, his expression turning somber. I don't know what to say, Mom. I don't know how to fix this. You can start by not letting her control everything, I said, standing up. You can start by remembering who I am. I'm your mother, Wade. And I'm not going to just fade into the background. I have a right to be here. I have a right to my home, to my family. Wade was silent, his eyes downcast. I could see the conflict in his face, but I didn't have time for his hesitation anymore. You have to make a choice, Wade, I said firmly. And you have to choose who you want to be. Because I won't be treated like this anymore. Not by you, not by anyone. I turned and walked out of the house, my heart heavy, but my mind clearer than it had been in weeks. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let anyone take my dignity, my home, or my family from me. It was time for me to stand up for myself, to reclaim what was mine. I wasn't going to wait for anyone's approval anymore. I was done being the victim. It was time to take control of my life. The following days were a blur of emotions. I spent my time walking through the house, trying to make sense of the mess I found myself in. I had never imagined things would end up like this. It wasn't just the house that was falling apart, it was everything, my family, my relationships, everything I had worked for. I thought I had given everything to them, but it was clear now that they hadn't appreciated it. I had to face the truth: I had been nothing more than a means to an end, a tool to be used and discarded when it was convenient for them. But I wasn't going to let that be the end of the story. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I had spent too many years being the one who took care of everything, the one who made sure everyone was happy. Now, it was time for me to take care of myself. That evening, I decided I needed to talk to Jessica. It had been too long since we had an honest conversation, and I couldn't keep letting her control the narrative. I had to find a way to make her see the truth. I couldn't let her keep walking all over me. So, I called her. Jessica, I said when she picked up the phone. I need to talk to you. There was a long pause on the other end, and I could hear her sigh. What now, Sarah? She said, her tone sharp. I'm not in the mood for one of your lectures. This isn't a lecture, Jessica, I said, my voice firm. This is me standing up for myself. I've had enough of being treated like I don't matter. I've had enough of you and Wade making all the decisions without even consulting me. I'm not just some old woman who's supposed to sit in the corner and fade into the background. I'm your mother-in-law, and I deserve respect. There was a long silence before she finally spoke. You don't understand, Sarah, she said, her voice tinged with frustration. Wade and I are trying to do what's best for everyone. You don't know what it's like, trying to keep everything together while dealing with all the stress. You don't know what we've been through. I don't need to know what you've been through, Jessica, I shot back. What I need is for you to understand that I've been here, fighting for this family, long before you ever came along. You think you're the only one who's stressed out? You think you're the only one who's had to sacrifice? I've been doing this for years. I've been the one who held everything together, and now you're treating me like I don't even matter. You don't get it, she said, her voice now raising in anger. Wade and I are trying to build a life together. We can't do that if we're constantly having to worry about you and your problems. You don't need this house. You don't need all this space. You're too old to be living here alone. I felt a surge of anger rise in me, but I fought to keep my voice steady. I'm not too old to live in my own home, Jessica. And I'm not going anywhere. This house is mine. I built this life with Noel, and I won't let you or anyone else take it from me. You may think you're doing what's best for everyone, but you're not. You're doing what's best for you. And I'm done being your doormat. I could hear her breathing heavily on the other end of the line, but she didn't respond. You're not going to push me out, Jessica, I continued. I've spent too many years being pushed aside, being ignored, being made to feel like I don't matter. But that's not who I am anymore. I've spent my whole life taking care of everyone else, and now, it's time for me to take care of myself. If you want to fight, fine. But don't expect me to roll over and let you win. I won't let you take everything from me. There was a long silence. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I didn't let it show. I had to stand firm. I had to make her understand. Finally, Jessica spoke, her voice much softer now. I didn't mean to hurt you, Sarah. I don't know what to do. Everything's changing so fast, and I'm scared. I know you're scared, Jessica, I said, my tone softening just a little. We're all scared. But that doesn't mean you can treat people like they don't matter. That doesn't mean you get to push people aside just because it's easier for you. You need to learn that sometimes, the people who love you the most are the ones you need to protect, not discard. I could hear her breathing more evenly now, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had made a breakthrough. I'm not asking for much, Jessica, I said. I'm asking for respect. I'm asking for a little kindness. And if you can't give me that, then I don't know what else to say. The line went quiet again, and for a moment, I thought she might hang up. But then, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll try, Sarah. I'll try to be better. I felt a small sense of relief wash over me, but I knew this wasn't over. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight. But it was a start. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life, and I wasn't going to back down now. I wasn't going to let anyone dictate my future. I had spent too many years being the one who gave, the one who sacrificed. Now, it was time to focus on myself. It was time to rebuild. I was ready. And nothing was going to stop me. The following week, I began to take small but significant steps toward reclaiming my life. The conversations with Jessica had opened a door, but I knew there was still a long road ahead. For the first time in years, I wasn't just going through the motions, I was starting to live for myself. The first thing I did was take a walk through the garden. It had always been my sanctuary, the place where I could find peace and quiet, and it had become even more important now. I'd spent countless hours tending to the flowers, trimming the bushes, making sure everything was just right, and now, it felt like the only part of my life that still made sense. The bright colors of the flowers, the smell of fresh soil, the feel of the cool breeze, it all reminded me that I still had something to hold on to. I spent the entire afternoon outside, letting my mind clear and my heart settle. I didn't know exactly what my future looked like, but I knew I couldn't just sit around waiting for it to happen. I had to take charge. When I went back inside, I began to tackle the house, one room at a time. It wasn't just about cleaning up the physical space, it was about taking back control. Every sweep of the broom, every polish of the furniture, every small change I made felt like a victory. I was starting to create a space that was truly mine, one that no one could take from me. That night, I went to bed exhausted, but for the first time in weeks, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. The next morning, I decided to take a trip. I didn't tell anyone, not even Jessica. I needed some time away to clear my mind, to reconnect with myself. I drove to a small cabin by the lake that I had visited a few times in the past. It was the kind of place where you could sit on the porch and watch the sunset, where you could hear the sound of the water lapping against the shore. It had been years since I had taken a trip like this, and I knew it was exactly what I needed. The air was fresh, the surroundings peaceful, and as I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee in hand, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had spent so many years focused on everyone else, always putting their needs first, that I had forgotten how to focus on myself. Now, sitting there in the quiet of the morning, I remembered who I was before all the responsibilities, before all the sacrifice. I was more than just a mother, more than just a wife. I was Sarah, and I had a life worth living. The next few days were a mix of reflection and rejuvenation. I spent my mornings walking along the lake, and my afternoons reading, something I hadn't done in years. The peace I found in those quiet moments reminded me that I didn't need anyone's approval to be happy. I didn't need Jessica's validation or Wade's support. I could create my own happiness. I returned home feeling refreshed, determined to keep moving forward. But when I walked through the door, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. There was a letter on the kitchen table, addressed to me. My heart sank as I opened it, unsure of what I would find. The letter was from Wade. It was brief, but the words were enough to make my chest tighten. Mom, I've been thinking about everything. I know I've been distant, and I'm sorry. I realize now that I've been taking you for granted, and I don't want to lose you. I've talked to Jessica, and we're both committed to making things right. I want to be there for you, just like you've always been there for me. Can we start over? My hands trembled as I read the letter. Part of me wanted to be angry, to hold on to the pain, but another part of me felt a sense of relief. He was finally acknowledging everything, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could repair our relationship. I wasn't sure how things would go with Jessica, but I knew that with Wade, there was still hope. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't asking for perfection. I was asking for respect, for acknowledgement, for love. And maybe that was enough to start over. I picked up the phone and called him. His voice was tentative when he answered, but it was warm. Mom, he said softly. I got your letter, I said, my voice steady. And I think it's time we talked. I'm not saying everything is fine, but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to work on this. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then I heard him exhale, as though a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. Thank you, Mom, he said quietly. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to do whatever it takes to earn it. It was a start. It wasn't a quick fix, and I knew there was still a long road ahead. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had a purpose again. I wasn't just existing. I was living, and I was going to fight for the relationships that mattered to me. I wasn't going to let the past define me. I was going to define my own future, one step at a time. The next few weeks were a time of quiet transformation. I spent my days working on small projects around the house, things I had never taken the time to do before. I fixed the garden fence that had been leaning for months, painted the old rocking chair that had belonged to Noelle, and cleaned out the attic, sorting through old memories. With each task, I felt more like myself again, more in control of my life. But the real change came when I saw Jessica again. It had been a few weeks since I had received the letter from Wade, and things between us were still tense. I wasn't sure if Jessica was truly ready to repair our relationship, but I had decided to give it a chance. I had to. I couldn't keep living in a house full of resentment and fear. One afternoon, Jessica showed up at the door, her expression guarded. She was holding a small box in her hands, and I could see the hesitation in her eyes. Can we talk? She asked quietly, her voice soft but laced with uncertainty. I stood there for a moment, considering her words. Part of me wanted to slam the door shut and tell her to leave, but another part of me knew this was the moment we needed to face each other. I nodded slowly and stepped aside, allowing her to come in. We sat in the living room, the silence between us thick and heavy. I didn't know what she wanted, but I could feel the weight of everything that had happened hanging in the air. She placed the box on the coffee table and looked at me with a mixture of guilt and apprehension. I'm sorry, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I've been selfish. I've been so caught up in my own stuff that I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I've treated you horribly, and I can't take that back. But I want to try and make things right. Her words caught me off guard. I had expected anger, excuses, maybe even more of the same indifference, but not this. This was different. For the first time in a long while, I saw vulnerability in Jessica's eyes, and it made me wonder if maybe there was still hope for our relationship. "I've spent my whole life trying to make things work for everyone else," I said, my voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I've always put my family first, always tried to keep the peace. But in doing that, I lost myself. I lost who I was. And when you treated me the way you did, it felt like all of that was for nothing." Jessica nodded, her eyes filling with tears. I know, and I'm sorry. I didn't see how much I was taking from you. I just thought I was doing what was best for Wade, for our family, but I see now that I was wrong. You've given everything for this family, and I never appreciated it. I'm sorry, Sarah. Truly." There was something about the sincerity in her words that made me believe her. It wasn't an easy apology, but it felt real. It was the first step toward healing, and I wasn't sure what to do with it. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to turn my back on it. I had spent too many years walking away from difficult conversations, from facing the truth. It was time to change that. I took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. "I can't forget what happened, Jessica," I said, my voice soft but firm. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to work through this, if you are." She wiped her eyes and nodded. "I am. I want to make things right. I want to have a relationship with you, Sarah. I don't want to lose you, not after everything we've been through." We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of our past hanging in the air. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but for the first time in a long while, I felt like there was a chance to rebuild, to repair what had been broken. The box on the coffee table remained untouched, but I knew it wasn't just a gift, it was a symbol of the apology Jessica had made. She wasn't just asking for forgiveness, she was offering me a chance to be part of her life again. As I looked at her, I realized that this wasn't just about repairing our relationship, it was about me finding a way to forgive, to let go of the anger that had held me hostage for so long. It was about learning to trust again. And that was going to take time. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't afraid of the work anymore. I wasn't afraid to face the truth. I had spent so many years being afraid, being the one who sacrificed, being the one who took the blame. But I was done with that. I was ready to stand up for myself, ready to rebuild what had been broken, even if it meant facing the hardest truths. I wasn't sure where things would go from here, but I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer afraid. I had taken back control of my life, and that was the most powerful thing I could have done. The days following that conversation with Jessica were filled with small victories and quiet moments of reflection. I had never been one to back down from a challenge, and now, more than ever, I was determined to fight for what was mine. I spent my mornings continuing the work I had started, cleaning, organizing, and finding new ways to make the house feel like home again. But more than the physical changes, it was the mental shift that had begun to make the biggest difference. I had spent so much time giving, so much time focusing on everyone else, that I had forgotten to take care of myself. It wasn't just about cleaning the house or redecorating the rooms, it was about reclaiming my life, about taking the time to think about my own needs and desires. It wasn't easy, of course. There were still moments of doubt, moments when I wondered if everything was truly going to be okay. But those moments were fewer now. I was slowly learning to stand up for myself, to be proud of the woman I was, and to stop apologizing for my existence. I had come a long way from the days when I let others dictate my happiness, when I silently accepted the treatment I received. I wasn't going to let that happen again. I was beginning to find joy in the small things. A cup of coffee in the morning while I watched the sunrise. The sound of the birds outside my window. The way the sunlight filtered through the trees in the backyard. For the first time in years, I felt at peace. Wade and I hadn't talked much since our conversation, but I could feel the shift. He was trying. It was slow, and it wasn't perfect, but I could see that he was making an effort to understand. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, I had hope. I didn't need everything to be perfect. I didn't need to fix everything overnight. But I knew that I had taken the first step toward healing, and that was enough. The letter from Wade had been the beginning, and now, it was time to see where this new path would lead us. I had made my peace with Jessica, or at least I was working on it. I wasn't going to forgive her overnight, but I was willing to try. I wasn't going to let her actions define me anymore. I wasn't going to let her hold me back. Slowly, I started to reconnect with the people who had always been there for me. Carol, of course, was a constant source of support. She had always been there when I needed her, and I knew I could count on her no matter what. I also began to spend more time with old friends, people who knew me before all the chaos, people who saw me for who I really was. They reminded me of my worth, and I began to remember just how much I had to offer. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments when I felt alone, when the weight of everything pressed down on me, but I didn't let those moments control me anymore. I had learned that it was okay to ask for help, it was okay to lean on others, and most importantly, it was okay to prioritize myself. I wasn't selfish for wanting to be happy. I wasn't wrong for wanting respect. The months passed, and things between Wade and me improved, though it was a work in progress. I could tell he was trying, but I also knew that I had to continue standing my ground. I wasn't going to allow myself to be treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. I wasn't going to accept being pushed aside. But I also wasn't going to be bitter. I wasn't going to let anger consume me. I had let anger control me for too long, and it hadn't done me any good. So, I chose to let go of it, little by little, each day. It wasn't easy, but it was freeing. One afternoon, as I sat in the living room, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I stood up and walked to the window. To my surprise, it was Wade. I hadn't seen him in a few weeks, and I wasn't sure what to expect. He got out of the car slowly, his movements uncertain. He seemed almost nervous, but he smiled when he saw me standing at the window. I opened the door before he could knock, and he stepped inside. "Hi, Mom," he said softly, his voice quiet but warm. "I thought I'd stop by and see how you were doing." I smiled, feeling a warmth in my chest that I hadn't expected. "I'm doing well, Wade," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "How about you?" He shrugged, his expression softening. "I'm getting there. It's been hard, but I'm trying. I'm really sorry for how things went, Mom. I never meant to hurt you." I nodded slowly, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. "I know, Wade," I said, my voice gentle. "It's not going to be easy, but we'll figure it out. One step at a time." He smiled then, a genuine smile that I hadn't seen in a long time. "One step at a time," he agreed. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. I believed that things could get better. That we could heal. That we could rebuild what had been broken. I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I was ready for it. I was ready to face it head on, no longer afraid of what was to come. I had spent too many years letting fear control me. But now, I was in control. I was no longer a passive participant in my own life. I was Sarah, and I was going to live on my terms. And no one, not Jessica, not Wade, not anyone, was going to take that from me.